Good morning. I always kick off my first-year seminar for incoming college students with what seems like a simple question. How many of you have ever been asked why you're going to college? Invariably, only about 2 raise their hands. I see people nodding today. And those 2 who raise their hands are almost always first generation, the first in their family to attend college. When I ask the other students, why do you think you've never been asked? You can guess the answer. It's usually, it was just expected, or I need it to get a good job. Based on the assumption that it's harder to do something if you don't know why you're doing it, I'm here today to meddle and to help perhaps young people who are struggling with making a bad decision, worried, to help you make more informed decisions. If you can learn a bit today about how history and economic events may apply to you and have an impact on you. And my goal is to get you to think about your goals, to establish which are authentically yours and which maybe are not yours and you need to rethink them. I'm also here to challenge the assumptions that reduce college to a transaction in professional credentialing. Now, the idea of treating education like a socioeconomic class marker is not new. In 19th century England, formal education was reserved for the sons of the wealthy, the aristocracy, but it had absolutely nothing to do with how they got wealthy. In that time in history, wealth was conveyed along with your social rank through real estate. This is what made you a gentleman, okay? But that was disrupted by the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution made it possible for the first time in history to make money. Up until now, there'd just been an aristocracy and everybody else. But with the Industrial Revolution, we saw the rise of a middle class. People who created a new class by manufacturing and selling consumer goods. Manufacture requires workers. So, people migrated from rural areas to work in those factories. No longer for aristocratic masters or just their sustenance, but also for wages. And just as they had on farms, their children came to work with them alongside them in the factories to generate family income. Now, this is the first of a series of hard truths I'm going to be sharing. The ethical argument that child labor laws were put into place to protect children masks larger economic factors that were really driving those laws. Because what those laws were really intended to do was to pull children out of the workforce and send them to school in order to drive down the labor force and drive up wages for adults and create a generation of workers who had enough basic numeracy and literacy to be profitable. Now, with everybody now a consumer, you would think the middle class would be thrilled, right? But the aristocracy was still snubbing them. They referred to the middle class as new money, which meant your wealth was earned, it wasn't inherited. And to add injury to that insult, you couldn't vote if you didn't own land, and the aristocracy owned all the land. So, to bring themselves closer to their goals. And really, I have to tell you that not being able to shape government, not being able to vote, meant that they couldn't control things for their interests, and that really burned their crumpets. And so the middle class thought, you know what, what's the aristocracy done for us lately? We actually work for a living. We make more things, we make more money, there are more of us, we want more. So the middle class bought their sons access to formal education so that they could network with the elite, which helped them as they bought or married their way into the real estate that would get them the vote. And once they had that, they could raise themselves economically and socially. That just left that pesky new money insult. So the middle class did something brilliant. They redefined the definition of the word gentleman. The way we use the word gentleman is testament to how successful they were. When we say someone is a gentleman, we're not calling someone a landowner. We are calling them someone who treats people well, someone who has manners, someone who's educated. Collateral effect, when we say someone has class, we're not calling them rich nobility. We're saying that they behave like a superior person. Now, the middle classes workers saw all of this, and they thought, knowledge is power. So they formed working men's clubs, not for socializing, but to educate themselves. And I want you to pay attention to what their dues paid for. Their dues paid for access to other members, to learning spaces, to materials, to knowledgeable guides, and to experiences. The very same things we pay for when we go to college. Workers called this movement self-help. It was now understood that education was the key to social mobility. Because if being called a gentleman was based on your conduct and your character, that meant that it was a social status to which anyone could aspire, and with effort anyone could achieve. It was no longer based on an economic accident of your birth. I want for you to think about this. In that moment, they took new money, and this movement, the working class and middle class banded together, and this movement gave rise to a new term that we still use to this day as a term of respect, and that is self-made man. They took new money and turned it and said, self-made man. Everything you have, you earned. That's power. Now I want for you to jump from the 19th to the 20th century. When the men went off to World War II, women stepped up and kept the country functional. But when the men came home, the government needed those women out of the workforce. Sound familiar? They needed those women out of the workforce, and so they told them that home and hearth is what the boys fought for. That's where you belong. But that wasn't going to be enough. They still had a lot of people to absorb. So they gave returning soldiers a beautiful thank you for your service. You survived the war. We're going to send you to college to keep you out of the workforce until this glut is over. Men who had, up to that point, neither money nor incentive for college suddenly had both. I want for us to think about, and most of us know that blue collar means manual labor, but I want for us to think deeply about that metaphor. The collar is the yoke on a more evolved beast of burden. A blue collar hides the dirt and the sweat of manual labor. That's why it's used for uniforms. A white collar implies easier labor. It means you don't have to work with your hands. But it also means I can afford to replace an easily spoiled consumer good. Now, if your family, if your people were factory workers, farmers, if you were lucky enough to, say, own a butcher shop, and you suddenly had access to college to become white collar, that would feel like winning the lottery. Instant access to class mobility. This is where you come in. Think about it. The rich always had an inheritance to pass down. But in that moment, working class and middle class men got a legacy that they could pass down. I got to go to college, so you should go to college, so you must go to college. It was just expected. It's easy to understand, 4 generations, right? Now, I want for you to take a minute and reflect and think about for yourself, how did I get here? How did I get to college or the expectation that I will go? And if you're sitting here, if you are a woman, if you are a person of color, if you are an immigrant, if you are coming out of a high school where the expectation is not that you will go to college, but that you might not even graduate, don't give yourself a pat on the back for being here. Give yourself a parade. And if you think that all of this history doesn't apply to you, I beg you, please look up the history of redlining, which was outlawed in 1968, and think how you may have been impacted by the fact that larger economic forces and our own US government deprived people of color and devalued real estate, the single most common means of transmitting wealth between generations. These headlines behind me are 2021. That was then, this is now. I don't think so. So in doing this, I'm asking for you to think about how you approach college. I'm challenging you to change how you think about the purpose of college. Because if you approach college as only a means to a job, you are positioning yourself to serve larger economic forces, not to shape them. I'm asking for you to change how you think about why you are here. There's one more historic event that I want to talk about because it's not just ancient history that's shaping your future. And this is hard to talk about. But the death of over 1 million people in the pandemic taught us 2 brutal lessons that affect your future. One of them is that it has redefined our relationship to work because it has made us experience painfully and personally just how finite our time and our lives really are. And the second is that it has also created a current and projected workforce in which you will not want for work. And you're going to have more control over your work than the generation before you. So with that in mind, I want you to be absolutely clear about something. Work, it's unreasonable to think that work will make us happy, that all of our work is going to make us happy. It is completely reasonable, though, to use education to identify the components for building a life in which the majority of our work is meaningful. That's how I want for you to start thinking about you. I want for you to study you. I want for you to pay attention. What are the things that you're doing when you lose track of time? That's valuable data when you're trying to figure out what your interests are and what you could be studying and what your work could be and what your pleasures could be. It's also the case that developing your values makes it easier for you to make decisions and to move in the direction that you want to go. Those are the things that I'm challenging you to do today. And I want to be blisteringly clear. You have a choice. For the first time since World War II, you can legitimately question whether you have to go to college to be or become middle class. But if you're going to go, it's a choice, and you need to treat it like a choice and commit. Social scientists tell us that you are going to have over 20 jobs in your lifetime. Some of them will become obsolete in your lifetime, and some of them haven't been invented yet. So investing 4 years of your intellect and your heart and your money and your time in college needs to pay off in way more than a job. Now I'm challenging you to think about college not as buying a degree, because you are not buying a degree. What you are buying is access. Like the Victorian middle class, you're buying access to other members to grow your network. Like the Victorian working class, you're buying access to other members so you don't have to go it alone. You are buying access to spaces and to materials and to knowledgeable guides and to experiences that have been curated for you by people like me. But access is not achievement. Hence, exercise, bicycles, and gym memberships. Achievement is predicated on what you do with your access. James Clear argues that every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become. I am trying to challenge you today to vote with intention. And if you run your learning practice by not turning in work, skipping class, trying to get a passing grade without turning in the work, or by learning the material, or paradoxically, if you run your learning practice by only chasing grades and external validation, then in that moment, if every action you take is a vote for who you want to become, you're voting to become less. A wise man changed my life. Paul Handsome said, "I have a creative intelligence for which I am responsible." He was so wise, I married him. What that means is that if I have a creative intelligence for which I'm responsible, it is incumbent on me to define for myself what success is, and then to pursue that success by growing my creative intelligence, which is the engine that powers all the other things. I am responsible. Since I've been teaching young adults and adolescents since the late Cretaceous period, growing that engine is my go-to answer for why are we here. And I got it from an old dead white guy, Cardinal John Henry Newman, who said, "The purpose of college is to cultivate the integrative habit of mind." Newman said, "Not to know the relative disposition of things is the condition of slaves and children." 21st century translation: if you don't know how things relate to each other, if you can't make connections between ideas and causes and effects, you are dependent, you are manipulable, you are not free. Liberal education at its root, liber, means free. Liberal education is literally the education required to be and remain a free person. That's because education is liberating, right? That's why it was illegal to teach enslaved people how to read. Education is liberating, right? Now, I have spoken with students who say, "I'm struggling. I really don't like this. I'm not good at it. When am I ever going to use this?" It doesn't matter. Hear me. There is no wasted experience. There is no wasted knowledge. The act of struggle, of learning something when it's hard for you, of learning something that you're not naturally inclined to do, is a skill, and it is empowering. And it makes you a more authentic leader, and it also empowers you. If you can learn when you don't want to, you can learn when it's to your advantage, or you can learn when you really need to. In all of this, you may have noticed, I am not challenging you to find your passion. Because here's the last hard truth. Passion is frequently revealed by commitment and curiosity, not just motivating it. Persistent, committed curiosity applied to yourself and to your world and to the people around you who look like they're finding their work meaningful. That's going to reveal your path to you and power you while you're on it. And I urge you not to be afraid of the anxiety of not knowing where that path is taking you. It's okay if you can sit with that anxiety and you can apply that curiosity to yourself and you can grow your engine. Your path will reveal itself and you will power yourself on it. Stay curious, grow your engine, even when it feels like you don't know where you're going. Trust the process. Thank you.